So I just want to thank everybody for attending this important meeting on a simplified governance structure. Phil and I are going to be going over some of the package of information that's in front of you this morning. So we'll try to make this as brief as we can. Since we are talking about a simplified structure, we'll try to make our presentation as simple and straightforward as we can. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to talk a little bit about the previous structure that our church has worked under. Going back decades, our research indicates our church has operated in a similar fashion really back to the 1950s. So we've got 70 plus decades of operating under a very familiar structure to many of us. Under that structure, it revolves around a committee-based structure of governance. And so in your packet of information, we're not going to go through all of this today. This is kind of your homework to take home and to take a look at. It gives you some more details on the simplified structure. But what we want to do is cover the high points of this simplified form of governance. Phil's going to go into some of the reasons why we're recommending this change. And then at the end of this month, we're going to have an all-church vote on November 29th. That's Tuesday, November 29th at 7 p.m., where we'll vote on approving this simplified model. So under the previous structure, which I said we've been using for decades, it's a committee-based structure. It essentially has four main components to it. There's a trustees component, a finance component, a SPRC or HR function, and for our church we've used what we call a leadership council format. Other churches in the Methodist tradition have used something called an administrative or ad council. And so those four main components kind of make up our church. So this little graphic here, it's also in your packet. It just kind of shows the previous structure. As you can see, there's a lot of committees that are made up there, and obviously various subcommittees that come off of those committees there. Just taking a look at that, obviously one thing that sticks out is that it takes a lot of leadership positions to fill all of those committees. To kind of give you some background on how we came to look at a more simplified structure, this really came out of the strategic planning process that got started in 2019 that I was a part of. So as we were rolling out the strategic planning process, one of the recommendations that committee had was looking at potentially a kind of more efficient way of doing the government of the church. And so one thing that we realized in the strategic planning process was that this structure takes a lot of people. This model worked really well for churches that had a lot of members and had a lot of leaders that they could pull onto those groups. It also creates just a lot of meetings and a lot of kind of overhead. And so the strategic planning committee really made a recommendation that we look at adopting a new model of governing. So the strategic plan was ratified early this year, and so leaders of this church seriously looked at those recommendations in the strategic plan and said, okay, let's consider looking at a new model of governing for our church. And so essentially what we did early this year, we pulled leaders from trustees, we pulled leaders from SPRC, from the previous leadership council, and from finance, and we created a 9-member leadership board. So essentially what we decided to do, in consultation with our coach that we've been using, Brad Kalajanin, who's been helping us through the strategic planning process, and also in consultation with the district superintendent, we began to explore a simplified, accountable structure of government. And so in March, those 9 leaders got together for our first meeting, and we decided to call ourselves the Leadership Board. And we've been working very closely from this book called Mission Possible. So all of the Leadership Board, we've been seriously studying this book. The authors are Kay Catan and Blake Bradford. If anybody's interested in a copy, I'm sure we can provide you with one if you're so interested. It essentially explains the reasons behind why a simplified structure of government works for churches, essentially in this age where we're seeing declining memberships, and it's hard to fill a large committee-based structure. That a simplified structure works for a lot of churches. This book is mostly focused on United Methodist churches that have moved into this model. The authors explain that this model would really work for any church looking to move away from a committee-based structure. So as you can see, this chart kind of simplifies what we've done really since March, which is to live into this new model. So under the previous committee-based structure, those trustees, SPRC, and finance, those have been consolidated into one leadership board model. As I said, we have 9 members on the leadership board. The senior pastor, Pastor Tanya, serves on that board. She doesn't have a vote. And then also the executive assistant serves on the board as well. So essentially, one of the advantages of this model is that there's essentially fewer meetings. And so fewer meetings means more opportunity and more time to put people to work into the actual ministry and to the work of the church. Under this model, everyone is held accountable for the mission. I'm going to go back a couple of slides. So on the background section, so we have here, just so it's in front of you, these are a couple of the things that the leadership board, since we began to operate in March, that we've worked on and affirmed. Essentially, our mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Here at Jackson First, we will invite all people to become disciples of Christ, inspire all people through worship, education, and fellowship, and ignite all people into life-changing mission, service, and generosity to others. And our core values was something that this book taught us that we had to kind of define what our core values are to our church. And so this was worked on and approved by the leadership board. The living the gospel message through word and deed. We will welcome, connect, and engage all people with God and with one another. So this book really expounds upon the fact that we need to kind of establish those core values first, and to our meetings kind of revolve around those important values that we hold dear for this church. So that's kind of the background on how we've operated really over the last decades, and how we've decided to come about this recommendation on a simplified structure. And I've kind of showed you the mission and our core value, and I've talked about the strategic plan and how that's played a role in why we're recommending this change. So I'll have Phil come up and talk about kind of points 3 and 4 here in the agenda.
All right, thank you, Jason. Can you hear me okay back there? Oh, good, all right. Maybe it's not good, I don't know, we'll find out. Jason did a very nice job of summarizing a lot of things that we're trying to accomplish. And I think probably the biggest thing we're trying to do is to increase the amount of time that we have making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That's what we're trying to do. And we do that by getting more people out in these action teams, not in meetings. The meetings will kind of be taken care of by the leadership board, because as Audie's pointed out to me, she says, you keep talking about fewer meetings and you're in meetings all the time. And that's kind of true with the leadership board, but not so much with the action teams. We want to increase the time spent on missions. We really want to, as efficiently, effectively as possible, use our church's resources in pursuit of the strategic plan, our missions, our core values. And the resources, I think you already know this, but the resources of the church, hey, that's us. Our time, our talents, our money. We want that to go as effectively as possible to accomplish the most important thing for the church. And we want to do it by removing bottlenecks, reducing red tape. I think the gospel concert that we're going to have here next Sunday is a really good example. I would hate to have to say, oh, that's a good idea. We're going to pass that past this committee and that board. You don't have to do that with this kind of thing. You get the idea, you figure out how you're going to do it, you do it. And of course, Dennis Hayek has really taken the ball and run with that, and we're thankful for that. But that's just one example. The action teams can do so much to implement the strategic plan. We just have to kind of set the goal, set the direction, and get out of their way. And it also gives us the opportunity, if somebody comes up with a really great idea, after we've just had a pledge drive, I don't want to go to the days when we say, hey, that's a good idea. Next year, put that in the budget. No, we don't have to do that. You know, we can look at good ideas when they're brought up. If this is a good idea, can we afford it? How are we going to do it? Are we going to use that as a trade-off for something else? How can we most effectively use our resources, again, our time, our talents, our financial resources to do everything that we're trying to do? We want to get as many boots on the ground as possible to do the Lord's work and spend less time in endless meetings that often don't really accomplish that much. We really want our church to be as vibrant and viable as possible. Next Sunday, my band is going to be playing a Dixieland church service in Dimondale for the Dimondale United Methodist Church. We've done that for years. Once or twice a year they have us there. This is a sad occasion to me because they've already told me that this is, at the end of the year, their church is done. I don't want that to happen here. I want this church to continue as a vibrant, viable church, truly following our mission and following the mission of Jesus Christ, making disciples for the transformation of the world. We have a procedure in place that will do that. There probably will be a few bumps in the road. We've had a couple of minor bumps so far, but I said this once before when I was addressing the congregation. Just because you hit a bump in the road, that doesn't mean you're on the wrong road. I think we're on the right road here. And what comes next is extremely important, and that is November 29th. That's when we're going to have the vote, the church's vote, to approve this plan. Now, I know that on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock probably isn't the most convenient time to ask people to come out, but we had some constraints that we had to work with. The district superintendent is going to be here to basically conduct that meeting. It's a one-agenda meeting, and that is to approve this proposal. The proposal basically is to replace the previous governance structure that we've had in place with this new simplified accountability structure, or the one board model. I say it's a one-agenda meeting, and that's true, but actually there are two important things that happen that night. We're also going to have, I'm told, I think I just confirmed with Tori earlier, we're going to have a dinner that night. So I don't know exactly if that's going to be a potluck or what it's going to be, but there will be food. If I have to go to Pizza Hut and pick up 20 pizzas, we're doing it. But it is important. We're required in changing a governance structure to have the members of the church, and you do have to be a member, to vote on this. And it has to be approved. And I think it will be. I think it should be, because I think it's a big step forward, and I think it'll help us accomplish what we want to. Jason, I think you were going to take up, now there are some of the, we do have a number, about a dozen action teams that are going to be doing a lot of the mission work. And we got a meeting coming up a week from Tuesday, and I've already got one additional action team in mind that I want to talk about. And that's the sort of thing that we can add as we go along, or change and delete as we go along. There you are. There's Jason.
Thanks, Phil. That was a great summary.
So we've had a lot of questions on, since we've been working into this model since March, what are some of the examples of kind of the mission work that's been initiated or improved upon since essentially we've been working into this since March. As Phil said, we have a gospel concert coming up next week. We've kept our young people safe with new tamper-resistant electrical outlets in the second floor education wing. We were able to send 4 adults and 8 youths to do mission work in Detroit. We've continued to feed hungry members of our community with canned and prepared fresh food. We've provided curriculum materials for church school leaders and to our Sunday school students. We've purchased 25 new pieces of church music to keep our music ministry fresh and vibrant. We've tuned two pianos to ensure our music is accurate and the best expression of praise. And we've made the church visible and beautiful, and hopefully free of vandalism with new outdoor lighting along West Michigan Ave. So those are kind of the top level things we've worked on as a leadership board as we've kind of lived into this new model. We've also received questions on what are some of those action teams that we've begin to set up, and a lot of these come out of the strategic planning process. So as you can see, there's a variety of teams that have been set up or kind of in the process of being set up. A building care team, they took on a lot of the roles of the previous trustees group. Finance, generosity, human relations, a growth team, worship design team, missions outreach, first impressions team, a communication and a technologies team. So we just wanted to get these groups in front of you. If there's anything that interests you and you're sitting here today that something in this realm sounds like something that you're interested in, or you have some talents or skills that you can bring, please feel free to talk to one of the leadership board members or to Pastor Tanya. We'd love to get you involved in kind of the working aspects of the church and the doing roles of this church. And that's kind of really the ultimate goal, is to get people out of the kind of endless meetings and into the actual rolling up the sleeves and doing things. And we think this simplified structure accomplishes that. So we feel like we've done our homework. We've been diligent about studying other churches that have gone to a simplified model. The nice thing about this is that we felt like we really can tailor this to our church, and we've done that over the last 8 or 9 months. As Phil said, there'll be a few bumps in the road as we go along, so we ask for your continued prayers and patience in this process. We really think that this model works to our strengths and allows us to really live into the strategic plan that was approved earlier this year. So again, if there are further questions, there is another town hall next week on Tuesday, November 15th at 5:30 here in Friendship Hall. And the all-church vote, as Phil said, will be on Tuesday at 7 p.m. And I believe that is a potluck at 6 o'clock. And so like I said, you can take this pamphlet of information home with you, and there are a frequently asked questions section. And we do want to open it up to questions at this time from anybody if you've got any burning questions on it. Yep, sir.
Could you explain the difference between action teams and committees?
Yeah, so I think the best way to describe it, the committees, essentially are standing structures, and so it's essentially the action teams are more. They're going to be actually doing things. I think they're actually going to be involved in kind of more ministerial aspects, kind of the rolling up the sleeves of the kind of the work of the church. I don't know if you got a better answer.
Committees sit, action teams do things.
Question in the back.
Jason, you might want to remind them that with the exception of HR functions, all leadership board meetings are open to anyone to observe. So
Yep.
You are welcome to come and just kind of watch what the have guests with us to answer your questions, to receive your comments, etc. But there's nothing closed or secretive about what the leadership board does, with the exception of the human resources function, in which case the leadership board would go into executive session, which is a closed meeting, and, yeah.
Yep, very good point. Yep, so as Pastor indicated, our meetings are open to anybody that wants to attend, and we've had some members of the congregation attend our meetings, and we welcome those visitors. And like Pastor Tanya said, on occasion we have to go into closed door session on private HR matters. But the vast majority of the time, it's open to anybody that wants to sit there. Our meetings usually last about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Is kind of where they've been averaging. We meet once a month. We do a lot of stuff via email and Zoom, kind of in between time. But we do plan to stand and have monthly meetings, at least for the time being. Question back there.
After spending 37 years plus in public education, this seems to be a lot like the school and the Board of Education. There are also lots of committees. And if you're going to have a meeting, you don't have a meeting, just have a meeting. You have to have a purpose. My question is, based on my experience, that the school systems had a system in place for checks and balances. Is that part of this plan? I don't see it. And if so, where is it? And how will it be facilitated and used to the best advantage for the church?
I think the checks and balances really will come about largely through the action teams. We are not having fewer people making decisions. We're having more people make decisions, getting more people involved. And we are definitely held accountable by this church, by all of you, to make sure that we're using all of our resources as efficiently as we can and for the right things. So I think there's probably much less secrecy with the model that we're proposing, and a lot more people involved with making decisions than there ever have been in the past. Somebody asked me once, are you trying to turn our church into a business? I think my answer when I thought about it a little bit is no. We're trying to turn this business into a church. Focus on the mission. Make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
I think there was a question back there. Yep.
If one was interested in participating in a work team, how would one go about finding the names of the people that are, say, leading or heading up the team, or wanting to contact somebody on the board? Is there a way, an easy way, one could say, look that up?
We should have put that in there, shouldn't we? We should have put it in the
That was a good suggestion. We should have put a little more detail on there, and so so we can.
Even outside of this whole day, say even 3 months from now, will there be some kind of an org chart posted anywhere?
Yep, I think as those groups kind of get finalized and molded, I think it's probably a good idea to put it on the website and put it, post it places so people can see it, at least even down here somewhere. So once those groups are more finalized, we can have it all listed out. And certainly in the time being, you can contact one of the leadership board members or Pastor Tanya, and we'd be happy to get you in touch with those leaders on those groups.
I'll put you to work.
Yeah. We need all the help we can get.
Have we made that list public through an announcement or anything?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Yep, we can.
Post it on the
Yep, we can post it right over here. That's a very good spot for it right there. Yep. I say everybody passes through here. So,
Have it in the monthly newsletter as
Yep,
well.
exactly. Yep, that's a really good place for it. Yep. I think the deadline for the newsletter is coming up, so that's a good place to put it. So.
The analogy that Tom is talking about is the tricycle thing, where you've got the action teams doing the pedaling. They're doing the work, they're getting things in place, getting a new supplier of coffee. One very simple example, but it's a nice one. But they're doing the work, they're determining what ought to be done. Chad's done a whole lot of work on a lot of things for us. And he's a member of our leadership board. But generally, the leadership board will be kind of steering the boat or steering the tricycle, working with all the action teams to get the momentum going, to get the pedaling done. And making sure that we all have a common vision of what we want to accomplish. And the more we keep coming back to our vision statement, our mission statement, our core values, and our strategic plan, that helps us get everybody moving in the same direction.
Yep, back there.
Okay, so the steering leadership team and peddlers, there's a connection though where the steering team would want to know what the peddlers are doing. So is there some kind of a connection in meetings where then the work teams are kind of reporting or checking in with the steering committee?
Yep, great question. So there is a check-in process. So we just recently developed a kind of standardized form for all of the action teams. And so at least monthly, they're going to submit a report to the leadership board that just kind of highlights the things that they're working on, kind of successes they've seen over the last month or two, concerns that they have, questions they may have for us, areas for improvement. If they're working with numbers, they may provide us with numbers of children in the Sunday school program, so there is a reporting function that they're going to provide to leadership. Megan's going to be in charge of organizing those reports, and so she'll provide those to the leadership board kind of ahead of our meeting, so we have those. And so just our last meeting, we actually received kind of our first round of reports from the action teams, and those were helpful, so they can check in, and more importantly, we can figure out what resources do they need from us, and we can start to think about they're not just operating out here as these islands, they're kind of still checking in, and certainly we're going to be working hand in hand with them as they have needs, and certainly hopefully reporting successes to us that come along the way for those groups.
And there's a layer between, Kelly, and that's the staff. Each one of the staff people have responsibility for managing a certain group of action teams and or administrative teams. And the staff meets every single week to coordinate work, to share information. And so the board is governing and making sure that we're fulfilling the vision. The staff is managing the work of all of the action and administrative teams. And the body of Christ is doing the ministry, actually making the pedals go.
Yep, question.
How is the average Joe going to find out exactly what's going on with the team?
For those of you who didn't hear, Barry wants to know how the average church member will know what's going on within the team. Well, we're not gonna, there's no attempt to keep things secret. We'll definitely have announcements from the pulpit from time to time, announcements on the announcement page and all of our communications. But as far as telling you exactly how that's gonna work, I guess all I can say is we're gonna try to communicate, and we're gonna try to make sure that we know that the church supports the different missions and different activities that we're pursuing. So, but.
And the communications team
Yes.
is actively working on a full-scale plan to make sure that you know what's happening in the church. But that's a piece that's in process. That's one of the action teams, though, is the communications team.
Yes. Very good.
Melinda.
This may be self-explanatory to others, but I'm a bit, have a vague view of what the generosity team is going to work on.
The what team?
Generosity?
Well, in the past, this church has done what most churches do. You have an annual pledge drive. People give money every week or every month, or have it transferred from their bank account, or however they do it. The generosity team will be looking at things beyond that, things such as estate planning. Chad and I have worked some on estate planning over the past few years. That's just one example, but other ways of providing opportunities for our church members to get involved with generosity, not just with money, but with time and talent. So that's what they're going to be looking at, is how can we get our church members to be even more generous perhaps than they are, or to continue to be generous of supporting what the church is doing. Yes, sir.
Yes, I presume all these teams have been in place at some other churches?
Yes. Well, I don't know if all of them have, but the process has been in place. And Tanya would know more than I about what some of the specific churches have that's comparable to this as far as teams. But I think they're probably pretty similar.
They're very similar to what other churches do, but each congregation has the option, once the basic structure is in place, each congregation has the option to contextualize it so that our specific needs are met. You have to have a building care team because they oversee kind of the nuts and bolts of maintaining this beautiful facility and the parsonage. You have to have a human resources team which supports, encourages, and holds accountable all of your paid and unpaid staff. You have to have other pieces in order to carry out the ministry. But we have the flexibility to add additional teams as we need to in order to carry out the ministry of the church, once those primary basics are met.
I also was wondering, maybe after this is new to a lot of the members, that possibly after 6 months or so, that these teams are in place, that maybe a report would be given to see how they're doing.
Communications team, I'm sure, will be doing that through normal publications and probably through some special releases too. That's a good idea.
And by the way, you've been hearing from the teams in worship every week for the last 2 months. Each month, a different team has been responsible for communicating during worship. During the month of October, you heard from the mission outreach team, and they gave you some highlights of the kind of things that they're doing. So again, listen carefully during worship because you're going to see and hear what's happening in these teams all along. In September, the First Impressions team shared with you every week something that was going on in terms of hospitality, and that will continue to be the case.
Okay. We realize we're standing between everybody and the Detroit Lions football game. And you're welcome. But are there any other questions? If not, thank you for your attention.